My name is Marcus Chen. I'm 36 years old, and last Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting in my home office reviewing quarterly reports when my security system chimed. Someone was at the gate. I glanced at the monitor and saw a delivery truck, one of those big brown ones you see everywhere, waiting to be buzzed through. I almost had my assistant handle it. That's what I usually do. But something made me look closer at the screen, zoom in on the driver's face as he leaned out the window to press the intercom button. My coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. It was my brother, Derek Chen, the golden child of our family, the one who had spent our entire childhood telling me I would never amount to anything, the one who had stood in our parents' living room 20 years ago, looked me dead in the eyes, and called me the family disgrace. Now he was wearing a brown uniform and delivering packages to my mansion. I sat there for a long moment, watching him on the screen. He looked older, obviously. We both were. But there was something else different about him, something in the way he held himself. The arrogant posture I remembered from our youth was gone. His shoulders were slightly hunched, his movements tired. He checked his phone, probably tracking how many more deliveries he had to make before his shift ended. He had no idea whose house this was. The property was registered under my company name, not my personal name. To him, this was just another stop on his route, another package to drop off, another few seconds in a day full of endless driving and heavy lifting. I could have let my assistant handle it. I could have stayed in my office, let him leave the package at the gate, never known the difference. That would have been the mature thing to do. But I had waited 20 years for this moment. 20 years of building, struggling, succeeding, and wondering if he ever thought about the brother he had thrown away. 20 years of imagining what I would say if I ever had the chance. I pressed the button to open the gate and watched his truck roll up the long driveway toward my front door. Then I walked downstairs to meet him. Before I tell you what happened when Derek saw my face, when he realized whose house he had been delivering to all along, I need to take you back to the beginning, back to the family that shaped us both, the childhood that broke me, and the moment when my own brother decided I wasn't worth keeping. Growing up in the Chen family meant growing up with expectations. My parents, first-generation immigrants from Taiwan, had sacrificed everything to build a life in America. My father worked 16-hour days at the restaurant he owned. My mother handled the books while raising the sons and maintaining a household that would have exhausted 3 people. They wanted us to succeed. That was the whole point of their sacrifice. They wanted their children to become doctors, lawyers, engineers, the kind of professionals who would validate every difficult choice they had ever made. Derek understood this instinctively. He was born knowing how to perform, how to give our parents exactly what they wanted to see. Good grades, good behavior, good answers to every question. He was 3 years older than me, and by the time I was old enough to understand anything, he had already established himself as the standard I would be measured against, and I could never measure up. It wasn't that I was stupid. My IQ was actually higher than Derek's, something I found out years later when I took a professional assessment. But I was different. I learned differently, thought differently, processed the world differently. The traditional academic environment that Derek thrived in felt like a prison to me. I couldn't sit still in class. I couldn't memorize facts without understanding the systems behind them. I asked questions that annoyed my teachers, challenged assumptions that were supposed to be accepted without debate. In a family that valued conformity and achievement, I was a constant source of disappointment. My father's disapproval was silent but heavy. He would look at my report cards, then at Derek's, and shake his head without saying a word. The comparison was always there, always unspoken, always understood. My mother tried harder to connect with me, but even she couldn't hide her confusion. Why couldn't I just be normal? Why couldn't I just do what was expected? Why did everything have to be so difficult with me? Derek, meanwhile, flourished in the role of golden child. He was captain of the debate team, valedictorian of his class, accepted to every Ivy League school he applied to. Our parents beamed whenever his name was mentioned, glowed whenever his accomplishments were discussed, and he knew exactly how to use his position to make my life miserable. The cruelty started small. Comments at dinner about my grades. Eye rolls when I tried to explain myself. Subtle jabs that our parents either didn't notice or chose to ignore. But it escalated as we got older. By the time I was in high school and Derek was in college, his contempt for me had become something darker. He would come home for holidays and spend the entire time pointing out my failures, comparing me unfavorably to himself, making sure our parents knew exactly how disappointing I was. "You're never going to amount to anything," he told me once, during a particularly brutal Thanksgiving dinner. "You're going to end up working at Dad's restaurant, washing dishes until you're 50. That's all you're good for." I looked at my parents, waiting for them to defend me. My mother stared at her plate. My father said nothing at all. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself that I would prove them all wrong, that I would find my own path, that I didn't need their approval to succeed. But the truth is, it did matter. Every dismissal, every comparison, every moment of being overlooked, carved a little deeper into my soul. By the time I was 17, I had stopped trying to earn their love. I had started just trying to survive. The breaking point came the summer after my high school graduation. I had somehow managed to graduate, despite years of struggling with a traditional education system that seemed designed to exclude people like me. My grades weren't great, but they were passing. I had even gotten accepted to a decent state university, not the Ivy League like Derek, but somewhere. I thought maybe, finally, my parents would be proud. I had done it. I had made it through. The family meeting happened 3 days before I was supposed to leave for college. My parents called Derek home from his summer internship at a prestigious law firm. They sat us all down in the living room, the same room where Derek had dismissed me so many times before. Something in the air felt different, heavy, final. "Marcus," my father began, and I knew immediately that this wasn't going to be good. He never used that tone unless he was about to deliver bad news. "We've been thinking a lot about the future," my mother continued, "about what's best for the family." I waited, my heart already sinking. "Your college," my father said. "It's going to cost a lot of money. Money we don't really have to spare." I knew things were tight. I had always known. But I had been counting on the savings they had set aside for my education, the same savings they had used to send Derek to Columbia. "We've decided," my mother said, and her voice wavered slightly. "We've decided to invest that money in Derek's law school instead. He's been accepted to Harvard, and the opportunity is too important to pass up." I stared at them. "You're taking my college fund to pay for Derek's law school?" "It's not like that," my father said quickly. "Derek's career has so much more potential. The return on investment will be much higher. Once he's established, he can help the whole family." "And what about me?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "What am I supposed to do?" Derek leaned forward, and there was something almost gleeful in his eyes. He had been waiting for this. I could see it. "Be realistic, Marcus. You barely graduated high school. You're not cut out for college anyway. You should stay here. Help Dad at the restaurant. That's what you're good at." I looked at my parents. Tell him he's wrong. Tell him I matter too. But they didn't. My mother looked away. My father nodded slowly, like Derek had just said something wise. "Derek is right," my father said. "This is what's best for the family. You'll understand someday." Something cracked inside me at that moment. Not broke, cracked. A fracture that would take years to fully split apart. But it started right there, in that living room, with my parents choosing my brother over me and calling it practical. Derek wasn't finished. He stood up, walked over to where I was sitting, and looked down at me with an expression I will never forget. It was contempt mixed with pity, the way you might look at an animal you've decided to put down. "Let's be honest, Marcus. You've always been the family disgrace. The sooner you accept that, the easier things will be for everyone." The family disgrace. The words hung in the air like a sentence. My parents said nothing. They didn't tell him to apologize. They didn't disagree. They just sat there, letting the verdict stand. I stood up slowly. I walked to my room. I packed everything I could fit in a duffel bag. And that night, while everyone was sleeping, I left. No note, no goodbye, no explanation. If they wanted me to be nothing, I would become nothing to them. And then, someday, I would become everything they had told me I couldn't be. I was 17 years old, alone and terrified. But I was also free. Before I tell you about the years that followed, about how I built myself from nothing into something my family couldn't ignore, I want to pause for a moment. If you're watching this and any part of this story hits close to home, if you've ever been the one your family gave up on, the one they counted out, please take a second to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love hearing from people who understand what it feels like to start with nothing but the determination to prove everyone wrong. Now, let me tell you how I went from family disgrace to self-made millionaire. The first few years after I left home were brutal. I had no money, no connections, no safety net. I slept in my car for the first 3 months, worked odd jobs during the day, and taught myself everything I could at public libraries and free internet cafes at night. I discovered something about myself during those hungry years. The same qualities that had made me a failure in traditional education: the restlessness, the questioning, the inability to accept things without understanding them, turned out to be exactly what I needed to succeed in the real world. I started noticing things other people missed: patterns in how businesses operated, inefficiencies that cost money, opportunities hiding in plain sight. My first real break came when I was 19. I was working as a janitor at a tech startup, the lowest position possible, invisible to everyone who actually mattered. But I watched, I listened, I learned. The company had a supply chain problem they couldn't solve. It was costing them thousands of dollars a month, and they had hired expensive consultants who couldn't figure it out. I could see the solution clear as day. It was obvious to me, the way the pieces fit together, the way the system could be optimized. One night, I stayed late and typed up a proposal. Nothing fancy, just a clear explanation of the problem and how to fix it. I left it on the CEO's desk before I went home. The next morning, she called me into her office. "Did you write this?" she asked, holding up my proposal. I thought I was about to get fired. "Yes." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she smiled. "How would you like a real job?" That was the beginning. Over the next 5 years, I worked my way up through that company, learning everything I could about technology, business, and how to turn ideas into reality. I was promoted 4 times. I saved them millions of dollars. And when I finally left to start my own company at 24, 3 of their best engineers left with me. My company, Apex Solutions, started in a garage. Literally. I know it's a glitch, but that's because it happens. We built software that helped businesses optimize their operations, the same kind of problem solving I had done as a janitor, but scaled up and automated. The first year, we almost went bankrupt twice. The second year, we broke even. The third year, we made a profit. The fourth year, we landed a contract with a Fortune 500 company that put us on the map. By the time I was 30, Apex Solutions was worth $50 million. By 33, we had been acquired for $200 million. I walked away with $80 million in my pocket, enough to never work again if I didn't want to. But I did want to. I started investing in other companies, mentoring other entrepreneurs who reminded me of myself, building a portfolio that grew faster than I could have imagined. I bought the mansion on my 35th birthday, 12,000 square feet on 3 acres of manicured land, a pool, a tennis court, a garage that could hold 8 cars. Everything I had ever dreamed of during those nights, sleeping in my car, wondering if I would ever amount to anything. The family Disgrace had done okay for himself. During all those years, I kept tabs on my family from a distance, not because I wanted to reconnect, but because I needed to know. I needed to see how their bets had paid off. Derek had gone to Harvard Law, just as planned. He had graduated in the middle of his class, nothing special, and gotten a job at a medium-sized firm. He worked there for 8 years, making good money, but never making partner. Then the firm downsized, and he was let go. He bounced around for a while after that. Smaller firms, less prestige, lower pay. His marriage fell apart when his wife realized he wasn't going to become the success story he had always promised. He moved back to the city where we grew up, took a job at a legal aid clinic, and eventually stopped practicing law altogether when the stress got to be too much. The last update I had, about a year ago, was that he was working as a delivery driver. The same brother who had told me I would end up washing dishes was now delivering packages for a living. I wish I could say I felt nothing when I learned this. I wish I could say I had moved past the need for vindication. But the truth is, I felt a grim satisfaction. Not joy exactly, more like justice. He had been so certain of his superiority, so confident that he deserved everything and I deserved nothing. And now here we were, positions reversed. The universe correcting an imbalance I had felt my entire childhood. My parents had passed by then. My father 5 years earlier, my mother 3. I learned about both deaths through Google searches, not phone calls. I wasn't invited to either funeral. As far as my family was concerned, I had ceased to exist the night I walked out their door. That was fine. They had ceased to exist for me too. Or so I thought, until Derek pulled up to my gate in his delivery truck. I stood in the doorway of my mansion and watched him walk up the path. He was looking at his scanner, checking the package details, completely unaware of what was about to happen. Delivery for Apex Holdings, he called out without looking up. Need a signature. I didn't say anything. I just waited. He looked up and froze. The package slipped from his hands and hit the ground with a soft thud. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out. Hello, Derek? He stared at me like he was seeing a ghost, which, in a way, he was. The brother he had written off 20 years ago, the family disgrace, the nobody who would never amount to anything, was standing in front of him in a $3,000 suit in the doorway of a house that cost more than Derek would earn in 10 lifetimes. Marcus? His voice came out strangled. What the hell? It's been a long time. I kept my voice casual, almost pleasant. Nice uniform, by the way. He looked down at himself, at the brown shirt and brown pants, at the scanner in his hand, at the package on the ground. Then he looked back up at me, at the mansion behind me, at everything that didn't make sense. This is your house? It is. But how? I thought. He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. You thought what? That I was washing dishes somewhere? That I never amounted to anything? That your prediction came true? He flinched like I had hit him. I gestured toward the door. Why don't you come in? I think we have a lot to talk about. For a moment, I thought he would refuse. I could see the war in his eyes, the pride fighting against the curiosity, the shame battling the need to understand. But curiosity won. It usually does. He followed me inside. The foyer alone was bigger than the apartment Derek was living in now. I knew because I had looked it up. 600 square feet, 1 bedroom, a kitchen so small you could touch both walls at the same time. That was the life of the man who had told me I would never succeed. I led him through the house slowly, giving him time to take it all in. The original artwork on the walls, the imported marble floors, the view of the pool and tennis court through the floor-to-ceiling windows. By the time we reached my office, his face had gone through about 17 different expressions: shock, confusion, envy, shame, something that looked almost like grief. I poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a bottle that cost more than his weekly paycheck and handed him one. Sit down. I indicated the leather chair across from my desk. Tell me about your life. He sat. He didn't drink. He just held the glass and stared at it. How did this happen? He finally asked. How did you become? Gesturing vaguely at everything this. I leaned back in my chair. Hard work, smart decisions, a willingness to bet on myself when no one else would. But you were. He stopped. The family disgrace? I finished. Yeah, I remember. I remember every word you said, Derek. Every time you put me down. Every time you told me I was nothing. Every time Mom and Dad nodded along while you explained why investing in me was a waste of money. He looked away. That was a long time ago. 20 years. I took a sip of my whiskey. 20 years since you convinced our parents to take my college fund for your law school tuition. 20 years since you looked me in the eye and told me I would never amount to anything. How's that law career working out, by the way? The words were cruel, and I knew it, but I had earned the right to be cruel. I had earned it. With every night I spent hungry, every rejection I faced, every moment I wondered if maybe they were right about me. Derek's face crumpled. The mask of confidence he had worn our entire childhood, the superiority he had wielded like a weapon, it all fell away. What was left was just a tired man in a delivery uniform, sitting in his brother's mansion, confronting the ruins of everything he had believed about himself. I messed up, he said quietly. I know I messed up. Which part? All of it. He finally looked at me. The way I treated you. The way I let Mom and Dad treat you. The things I said. He shook his head. I was so sure I was better than you. So certain that I deserved everything and you deserved nothing. I thought the world worked like a ladder. And I was climbing while you were falling. And now? Now I'm 56 years old. And I deliver packages for a living. His voice was hollow. My wife left me. My kids barely talk to me. I haven't practiced law in for years because I couldn't handle the pressure. And you, he gestured at the room. You're here. Yes, I'm here. We sat in silence for a moment. I watched my brother wrestle with something, some internal battle I could only partly understand. I've thought about you, he finally said, over the years, wondered what happened to you. Mom and Dad never talked about you after you left. It was like you had never existed. I know. I made sure to stay invisible. I didn't want any of you to see me until I was ready to be seen. Why now? I smiled slightly. I didn't plan this, Derek. You just happened to deliver a package to my house. But maybe it's time. Maybe we've both spent long enough pretending the other one doesn't exist. He nodded slowly. I'm sorry. The words landed differently than I expected. I had imagined this moment so many times, imagined him begging for forgiveness while I stood triumphant and unmoved. In my fantasies, I was always cold, always distant, always the winner savoring his victory. But sitting here, looking at the broken man my brother had become, I didn't feel victorious. I felt something closer to sad. Two brothers who had been pitted against each other by a system that could only see one kind of success. Two lives shaped by the same parents in completely different ways. Two strangers sitting in an office, trying to figure out if there was anything left worth saving. What are you sorry for? I asked, specifically. He took a breath. I'm sorry for telling you that you were worthless. I'm sorry for making you feel like you didn't belong in our family. I am sorry for taking your college money and acting like it was your fault for not being worth investing in. He paused. I'm sorry for not reaching out after you left. I told myself you would come back. I told myself if you really wanted to be part of the family, you would try harder. I never considered that maybe we were the ones who should have been trying. I said nothing. I let him sit with his words. I'm sorry I was such a terrible brother, he continued. I'm sorry I wasted so many years being arrogant and blind. And I'm sorry that when I finally understand all of this, it's too late to fix any of it. Is it? I asked. Too late? He looked at me, surprised. What do you mean? I set down my whiskey glass. I'm not going to pretend that everything is okay. It's not. What you did, what they did, it shaped my entire life. I spent years proving myself to people who weren't even watching, succeeding out of spite instead of joy. That's not healthy. That's not healing. I leaned forward. But I also built something real, something that matters to me. And I did it despite what you said, not just because of it. I found my own way, and I'm proud of that. You should be, he said quietly. I continued, looking at him. The question is, what happens now? We're both older, both different people than we were 20 years ago. Do we walk away from this and never speak again? Or do we try to build something new? He blinked. You would actually want to try? After everything? I don't know, I said honestly, but I'm willing to find out. The question is whether you are. Let me pause here for a second. I know what you're probably thinking. Why give him anything? Why not tell him to leave and never come back? Why offer any chance of reconciliation to someone who hurt you so badly? And honestly, I asked myself the same questions. For years, I imagined this confrontation ending with me triumphant and him destroyed. I imagined revenge, not reconciliation. But here's what I've learned in the years since I left home. Revenge doesn't fill the hole. Success doesn't heal the wound. The only thing that actually helps is choosing to stop letting the people who hurt you control your future. If I had thrown Derek out, I would have been giving him power over me. I would have been saying that what he did still defined who I am, that I am still the wounded kid reacting to his cruelty instead of the grown man who built something on his own terms. I didn't want to be that kid anymore. I wanted to be the man who could look at his brother, acknowledge the harm, and still choose what happened next. That's not weakness. That's the real power. Type freedom in the comments if you understand what I mean. And if you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button. It really helps me know that these experiences resonate with you. Now, let me tell you what happened after that conversation. Derek and I talked for 3 hours that afternoon. He told me about his life, the parts I already knew and the parts I didn't. The slow collapse of his career, the divorce that cost him most of his savings, the estrangement from his children, who blamed him for driving their mother away. He talked about our parents too, how they had changed in their later years, becoming softer, more reflective. My father apparently had asked about me on his deathbed, wondered where I was, whether I was okay, whether there was any way to find me. I didn't tell Derek that I knew about the deaths, that I had deliberately stayed away from the funerals. That felt like a cruelty too far, even for our complicated history. What he told me instead was something I hadn't expected. Dad regretted it, Derek said quietly. Not at first, but later. When my career started falling apart, when it became clear I wasn't going to be the success story he had invested in, he started questioning whether they had made a mistake. A mistake, I repeated. Choosing me over you. He looked down at his hands. He never said it directly, but I could see it. The way he looked at me sometimes, like he was wondering if he had bet on the wrong horse. That must have been hard for you. It was. Derek laughed bitterly. My whole life, I was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. And then suddenly, I was the disappointment. Everything I had built my identity on was crumbling, and I didn't know who I was without it. I considered this, in a way, Derek had experienced his own version of what I went through. He had been raised to believe he was special, superior, destined for greatness. When that narrative collapsed, he had nothing to fall back on. At least I had always known I would have to build my own foundation. Derek had spent his life standing on someone else's. I'm not asking for your pity, he said, reading my expression. I know I don't deserve it. I'm just trying to explain how we got here. I understand, I said, and I appreciate you being honest. So what happens now? I thought about it. I had options. I could send him away with nothing, satisfied that justice had been served. I could give him money, easy enough for me and life-changing for him, buying his gratitude without requiring his growth. Or I could do something harder, something that might actually make a difference. You mentioned your kids, I said. How old are they? 26 and 23, he replied. Jason and Michelle. Do they know about me? He hesitated. They know you exist. They know there was a falling out. They don't know the details. I nodded slowly. I want to meet them. He looked surprised. Really? I spent 20 years with no family at all. I built my own life, my own network, my own version of belonging. But blood still means something to me. Maybe it shouldn't, but it does. I paused. I'm not going to pretend to be your brother again overnight. We have too much history for that. But I'm willing to try building something new, starting with the next generation. Maybe your kids can have the uncle they should have had all along. Derek's eyes were wet. He tried to hide it, turning away. But I saw. That's more than I deserve. Probably. But it's not really about what you deserve. It's about who I want to be. The following months were a process of slow, careful reconciliation. Not with Derek, not directly. That relationship needed more time, more work, more honest conversations than we had managed in that first afternoon. But with his children, things moved faster than I expected. Jason and Michelle had grown up hearing fragments of the family story. They knew their father had a brother. They knew there had been a falling out. They had always sensed there was more to the story than they were being told. When I reached out, they were cautious but curious. We started with emails, then phone calls, then a lunch in the city. They were smart, both of them. I could see pieces of myself in them, the same questioning mind, the same refusal to accept easy answers. Uncle Marcus, Michelle said during our third meeting, why did you really leave? I told them the truth, not a sanitized version, not a diplomatic retelling. The truth. I told them about the favoritism, the college fund, the words their father had said. I told them about sleeping in my car and building a company and becoming the person their grandparents had never believed I could be. They listened without interrupting. When I finished, Jason spoke first. Dad never told us any of this. I'm sure he has his own version of the story, I said. That's how families work. Everyone remembers differently. But this is what really happened, Michelle pressed. You're not exaggerating. I'm not exaggerating. They exchanged a look. Something passed between them, some sibling communication I recognized from my own childhood. We want to get to know you, Jason said. Not just because you're successful or because you can help us with anything. We want to know the uncle we should have grown up with. I felt something shift in my chest. Something I had kept locked away for 20 years, protected behind walls of achievement and independence. I'd like that too. The next year was the most unexpected of my life. I had spent 2 decades convinced that I didn't need family, that I had built something better than what I was born into. And in many ways I had. But there was something about connecting with Jason and Michelle that filled a space I hadn't known was empty. We had dinner together regularly. I met their partners, attended their milestones, became part of their lives in a way I had never experienced. They were building their own careers, struggling with their own challenges. I offered guidance when they asked for it, support when they needed it, and space when they didn't. I tried to be the kind of family member I had always wanted, one who saw them for who they were instead of who I wanted them to be. Derek watched all of this from the edges, half grateful, half jealous. His children were rebuilding a connection with the uncle he had driven away, and there was nothing he could do but watch. We talked occasionally, Derek and I, never as easily as I talked with his kids. There was too much history between us, too many wounds that hadn't fully healed. But we were civil, we were honest, we were trying. About 8 months after our first confrontation, he called me with news. I got a job, he said, a real one. I waited. There's a nonprofit that helps former inmates re-enter the workforce. They needed someone with legal experience to help navigate housing applications, job training, paperwork. The pay isn't much, but it feels meaningful. I was genuinely surprised. That's great, Derek. That sounds like something that matters. It is. He paused. I wanted you to know because I think I finally understand what you meant about building something instead of just falling apart. Tell me more. All those years I was the golden child. I never had to develop any real character. Everything came easy. Success was just expected to happen. When it stopped happening, I had nothing. No resilience, no purpose, no idea who I was without the achievements. I listened, watching you, what you built, how you did it. It made me realize that the struggle wasn't a curse. It was actually a gift. It forced you to become someone. I never had to become anything, because I was already told I was everything. That's a hard lesson to learn at 56. It is, but I'm trying to learn it anyway. I didn't forgive him that day. Forgiveness isn't an event, it's a process. But I felt something loosen, some old knot of anger that had been tied inside me since childhood. He wasn't making excuses anymore. He wasn't asking for pity. He was just trying to become a better person, 20 years later than he should have. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all any of us could do. 2 years have passed since Derek showed up at my gate in that delivery truck. 2 years of rebuilding, reconnecting, and slowly learning what it means to have family again. I'm 38 now. My investment portfolio has doubled. I started a foundation to help first-generation college students from low-income families, the ones whose parents can't afford to support their dreams. We provide scholarships, mentorship, and the message that where you come from doesn't determine where you end up. Every year, we help about 100 students. Every year, I meet kids who remind me of the 17-year-old I used to be, scared and determined and convinced that they have something to prove. I tell them my story, not to brag, but to show them what's possible. I tell them about sleeping in my car, working as a janitor, being called the family disgrace. And I tell them that every single person who counted them out is going to regret it someday. Derek still works at the nonprofit. He's good at it, actually. The same determination that once drove him toward conventional success has been redirected towards something more meaningful. His kids tell me he's changed, become more humble, more present, more interested in who they are instead of what they accomplish. We have dinner together about once a month, the 4 of us. Derek, Jason, Michelle, and me. It's awkward sometimes. There are still silences that stretch to long, topics we carefully avoid. But we're building something, a new version of family, one that isn't based on competition or comparison. I don't know if Derek and I will ever be close. The wounds from our childhood run deep, and some scars don't fade no matter how much time passes. But we're not enemies anymore. We're something more complicated. 2 brothers who hurt each other and are slowly learning to do better. I'll take it. When I think back on all of this, on the journey from family disgrace to self-made millionaire, from abandoned brother to rebuilding uncle, I try to identify the lessons that actually mattered. The first one is this: the people who count you out don't get to define your ceiling. My parents and my brother were so certain I would fail that they couldn't imagine any other outcome. They were wrong. Their limitations became my motivation. Their dismissal became my fuel. Every time I wanted to quit, I remembered what they said, and I kept going. The second lesson is harder. Success doesn't heal childhood wounds. I thought if I could just become rich enough, accomplished enough, undeniable enough, the pain of being rejected would disappear. It didn't. I spent years achieving things that didn't make me feel any better, proving points to people who weren't even watching. The real healing started when I stopped trying to win and started trying to build. When I focused on creating things that mattered to me instead of things that would prove my family wrong. When I started living for my own approval instead of chasing theirs. The third lesson is the most important. You can choose who your family is. Blood matters, but it's not the only thing that matters. The family that raised me failed me in fundamental ways, but the family I built, the mentors who believed in me, the friends who became brothers, the niece and nephew who gave me a second chance at belonging. They're the ones who really count. And maybe, just maybe, there's room to include some of the people from before. Not because they earned it, but because holding on to anger is exhausting. Because forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, not a prize. They win. Because life is too short to spend it proving points to people who stopped mattering a long time ago. My brother called me the family disgrace. 20 years later, he delivered packages to my mansion. In a movie, that would be the end of the story. The underdog wins, the bully loses, justice is served. But life isn't a movie. It keeps going after the dramatic moment. You have to figure out what comes next, how to live with your victory, what to do with the power you've earned. I could have used that power to destroy him, to humiliate him the way he humiliated me, to make sure he spent the rest of his life knowing he was wrong about everything. Instead, I chose to use it to build something new. Not because he deserved it, but because I did. If you've made it this far, thank you. This story wasn't easy to tell, and I imagine it wasn't easy to hear. But I wanted to share it because I know there are others out there like me. The overlooked ones, the counted out ones, the ones who were told they would never amount to anything. Here's what I want you to know. You can amount to anything you decide to become. Their words don't define you. Their expectations don't limit you. Their failure to see your value doesn't mean you have no value. You just have to believe in yourself long enough to prove it. Hit that subscribe button if this story resonated with you. Drop a comment sharing your own experience, your own journey from being counted out to counting yourself in. I read every single one, and I love connecting with people who understand what this feels like. There is another video linked below about what happens when you stop seeking approval from the people who will never give it. I think you'll find it powerful. Until next time, remember, the best revenge isn't showing them they were wrong. The best revenge is building a life so good you don't care anymore what they think. Take care of yourself. You've earned it.